CR, which will fund the government through April 15th. It's the 7th, and also funds the Pentagon through September 15th. It's a compromise one that was reported out of the Appropriations Committee. Now to live coverage of the House. Thanks for being with us on this Thursday morning.
The House will be in order. The prayer will be offered by our chaplain, Father Coughlin.
Creator of the earth and skies, to whom all truth and power belong, grant us your truth to make us wise. Grant us your power to make us strong. We have not known you to the skies, our monuments of folly soar, and all our self-wrought miseries have made us trust ourselves the more. We have not loved you far and wide, and wreckage of our hatred spreads, and evils wrought by human pride recoil on unrepentant heads. We long to end this worldwide strife. How shall we follow in your way? Speak to mankind your words of life until our darkness turns to day. Amen.
The Chair has examined the Journal of the last day's proceedings and announces to the House his approval thereof, and pursuant to Clause 1 of Rule 1, the Journal stands approved. For what purpose does General Lady from Texas rise?
Mr. Speaker, pursuant to Clause 1 of Rule 1, I request a vote on the Speaker's approval of the Journal.
Questions on agreeing to the Speaker's approval of the Journal? Those in favor indicate by saying aye. Those opposed, no.
I request
opinion of the Chair, the ayes have it. The ayes have it. The Journal stands approved.
Mr. Speaker, I request an electronic vote of yeas and nays.
The yeas and nays are requested. Those favoring a vote by the yeas and nays will please rise. A sufficient number having arisen, the yeas and nays are ordered, and pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, further proceedings on this question are postponed. The Pledge of Allegiance today will be led by the gentleman from Georgia, Mr. Barrow.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members and guests, please join in. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The Chair will entertain up to 5 one-minute requests on each side. For what purpose does the gentleman from Ohio rise? Without objection, so ordered.
Mr. Speaker, we have a national debt of more than $14.2 trillion, and our unfunded obligations dwarf even that number. Each American taxpayer's share of our national debt is $128,000 and rising. Our nation is broke. The federal government has maxed out its credit card. Now, this House is listening to the American people, and we've put forth multiple plans to try and get our fiscal house in order. But Harry Reid and President Obama are still not listening. The clock is ticking, and because of their inaction, we are hours away from a potential government shutdown. Now, they'll deny that this fiscal crisis has been caused by their failed policies, but Americans are too smart to fall for that. Americans want the tools to grow the economy instead of growing government, so when making spending decisions, we should ask two simple questions in this House. How much does it cost, and who's going to pay for it? If we can't afford it and the American taxpayer is going to foot the bill, gentlemen, ladies, let's vote no. I yield back, Mr. Speaker.
Gentleman yields back. What purpose does the gentleman from California rise? Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, 1 year ago, this House overwhelmingly passed bipartisan legislation that would have prevented children from being abused in classrooms, but unfortunately it never became the law. In the years since then, children have suffered and been abused in school, and parents have felt completely helpless. The 2009 General Accountability Office told our committee of the shocking wave of abuse by untrained school staff that were misusing emergency interventions. Most of these victims were children with disabilities. Some were 3 and 4 years old. In some cases, children died. Restraint and seclusion should be used only as a last resort by trained professionals, but the GAO found that was not the case. This is an unacceptable, and yet it is a reality for too many children across the country. A media report out yesterday highlights that these horrific abuses continue through this past year. In Chicago, a 4-year-old boy's wrists were taped together with painter's tape and duct tape because he refused to take a nap and he didn't wash his hands. In Fayetteville, North Carolina, a 5-year-old student arm was broken when a teacher held him down. In New Orleans, a teacher handcuffed a male student by his ankle to a chair because he didn't follow the teacher's instructions. This abuse of children and the death of children has got to stop.
The gentleman's time has expired. For what purpose does the gentleman from South Carolina rise? The gentleman from South Carolina is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, Democrats in Congress are still setting up roadblocks to prevent a budget for this fiscal year, trying to conceal how much reckless spending the liberal majority in the last Congress refused to pass a budget threatening jobs. Rather than mortgaging the future, like the previous Congress, House Republicans have sent a common-sense budget to the Senate 47 days ago. This plan limits spending in order to promote job growth. Now we have liberals in the Senate refusing to pass the budget. This is failed leadership. Democrats in Washington are out of touch with everyday Americans who would rather play the blame game than offer real solutions. The liberal House majority last year failed to pass a budget. The new conservative House passed a budget, but the liberal Senate majority has failed to pass a budget. Liberals are clearly risking government shutdown. In conclusion, God bless our troops, and we will never forget September 11th and the global war on terrorism.
The gentleman's time has expired. For what purpose does the gentleman from Massachusetts rise? Without objection, the gentleman from Massachusetts is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, of every 10 people going hungry today, 6 are women. They are hungry not only because they are the majority poor, with the least access to schools, land, and markets, but because every mother will go to bed hungry before her child does. H.R. 1 cuts life-saving food aid, humanitarian and development programs almost in half. These programs make up less than 1% of the federal budget. Slashing them does nothing to fix the deficit, but will be devastating to millions of poor women and children. When world food prices are at all-time highs and there are more hungry people in the world than ever before, this is unconscionable. Over 30,000 people, religious and social leaders, are fasting in opposition to these budget cuts. Hunger should not be a partisan issue. I urge all my colleagues to join these brave citizens and reject these draconian cuts, support programs that protect the hungry and the most vulnerable here at home and around the world. Learn more at www.hungerfast.org.
The gentleman's time has expired. For what purpose does the gentleman from Illinois rise?
I ask permission to address the House for 1 minute and provide consent.
The gentleman from Illinois is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The UN commissioned its infamous Goldstone report following the 2008-2009 war between Hamas in Gaza and the State of Israel, a war which grew out of Hamas's ongoing rocket attacks, well over 4,000, intended to terrorize communities in southern Israel. This report alleged the sickening conclusion that Israel deliberately targeted civilians as a matter of policy, an accusation grossly offensive to me as an American and to the only nation in the Middle East whose freedoms and commitment to humanitarian values we all recognize and admire as mirroring our own. The Goldstone report has been held high by those in the international community seeking to delegitimize the state of Israel's very own existence. Now Richard Goldstone has publicly distanced himself from this deeply flawed conclusions of his own report. And so, Mr. Speaker, I ask, where does a nation go to get its reputation back? I hope and urge that we can begin to talk to the administration to inform the UN and the members of the Goldstone Commission to reconsider its own report, to block future UN actions based on its falsehoods, and to expeditiously introduce a measure properly exonerating Israel from this damaging libel. I yield back.
The gentleman's time has expired. For what purpose does the gentleman from Georgia rise?
Address the House for 1 minute, revise and extend.
Gentleman from Georgia is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to express my deep sadness over the passing of 4 Gulfstream Aerospace employees who perished in a test flight crash in Roswell, New Mexico this past Saturday. Gulfstream is headquartered in my congressional district, and I know firsthand the hard work, discipline, and dedication that Gulfstream employees put into their work. Last week, 4 of those employees lost their lives in the line of duty. Our thoughts and prayers are with the family, friends, and colleagues of Kent Crenshaw, Vivon Ragusa, David McCollum, and Reese Ollenberg. Today I want to honor their lives and their legacies. They'll be missed by their families, colleagues, and communities, and they have our deepest respect and appreciation. And with that, I yield back.
The gentleman yields back his time. For what purpose does the gentleman from Michigan rise?
I rise to address the House for 1 minute and revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentleman from Michigan is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As we're all very well aware, we are on the verge of a potential government shutdown over the critical issue of spending. And for those who are confused by the caterwauling that they hear from this chamber as to where the parties stand in relation to spending your money and the future deficits and debt of this country, let me put it as clearly as I can. The Democrats support shutting down the government for more spending. The Republicans support keeping open the government with less spending. I trust your wisdom to determine which you prefer and which you deem in the interests of this country. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back his time. For what purpose does the gentlelady from Texas rise? Without objection, the gentlelady from Texas is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I stand here this morning very troubled because the Republican budget will end Medicare and eliminate the guaranteed coverage. This is un-American. It slashes Medicaid for seniors in nursing homes, health care for children, and Americans with disabilities. This is un-American. It increases the cost of college education for close to 10 million middle-class students and their families. It gives away billions in subsidies to tax breaks to big oil. And it gives tax cuts for the wealthy that will add $1 trillion to the deficit. It gives tax breaks to corporations that send jobs overseas. Yes, we must cut, but we must cut with common sense. We must not gut the future of America. It has to be sensible. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back her time. For what purpose does the gentleman from West Virginia rise?
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute.
Without objection, the gentleman from West Virginia is recognized for 1 minute.
Today, Mr. Speaker, I'm introducing legislation that will prohibit the EPA from regulating fly ash as a hazardous material. Fly ash is an unavoidable byproduct of burning coal to produce electricity. Fly ash has been repeatedly tested and approved by the EPA for America's customers. Recycling fly ash helps to keep electric generation costs down, which in turn keeps electricity affordable for all our consumers. But if the EPA persists with its plans to designate fly ash as a hazardous material, the expense of handling the material will increase logarithmically, and so will our energy costs. Why would this administration want to increase the cost of electricity on our senior citizens, hospitals, schools, and American families? President Obama's relentless war on coal has been an unmitigated job killer and will have a ripple effect on all industries, especially those that recycle fly ash. That's why I'm proud to introduce this legislation, which has bipartisan support among my colleagues, as well as over 24 special groups. Thank you, Speaker.
Gentleman's time has expired. For what purpose does the gentleman from Tennessee rise? Without objection, the gentleman from Tennessee is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This House is an historic moment because we look at a possible shutdown of government. A shutdown of government that you have to look back and why may it occur? It's going to occur because we don't have a budget. And why don't we have a budget? Because we got a great deficit. And why do we have that great deficit? Because the Bush tax cuts got rid of the Clinton excess. We had, during Clinton's days, we had extra money. We balanced the budget. The Bush years, a deficit with the tax cuts which have been extended with the majority of the Republicans and some Democrats, and 2 wars overseas in Iraq and Afghanistan that were off budget, and they've cost us much. In the future, we're going to see a political Armageddon here about this continuing resolution and the budget of this country. And the issue is going to be whether we deal with the super rich or we guarantee America's past and care for everybody to have opportunity and a chance. Whether we care about the oil companies that make record profits and give them continued deductions, or whether we care about people that need education and health care. Medicare is at risk. Social Security will be at risk, and there's no jobs plan been put forward by this Congress. And that's just the way it is. And I yield back the remainder of my time.
The gentleman's time has expired. For what purpose does the gentlelady from North Carolina rise?
Mr. Speaker, by direction of the Committee on Rules, I call up House Resolution 206 and ask for its immediate consideration.
Clerk will report the resolution.
House Calendar Number 27, House Resolution 206. Resolved, that upon adoption of this resolution it shall be in order to consider in the House the bill H.R. 1363, making appropriations for the Department of Defense for the fiscal year ending September 30, 2011, and for other purposes. All points of order against consideration of the bill are waived. The bill shall be considered as read. All points of order against provisions in the bill are waived. The previous question shall be considered as ordered on the bill to final passage without intervening motion except 1 hour of debate equally divided and controlled by the Chair and Ranking Minority Member of the Committee on Appropriations, and 2, 1 motion to recommit. Section 2, the requirement of Clause 6A of Rule 13 for a 2/3 vote to consider a report from the Committee on Rules on the same day it is presented to the House is waived with respect to any resolution reported before April 11, 2011, providing for consideration or disposition of a measure making or continuing appropriations for the fiscal year ending September 30, 2011.
So ordered. Gentlewoman from North Carolina is recognized for 1 hour.
Mr. Speaker, for the purpose of debate only, I yield the customary 30 minutes to the gentleman from Massachusetts, Mr. McGovern, pending which I yield myself such time as I may consume. During consideration of this resolution, all time yielded is for the purpose of debate only. Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days to revise and extend their remarks.
Objection.
House Resolution 206 provides for a closed rule providing for consideration of H.R. 1363, which is a bill providing 1 week of continuing appropriations, a full year of funding for the Department of Defense, and cuts $12 billion in wasteful federal spending. Mr. Speaker, it's unfortunate that we are at this juncture, nearly 7 months into fiscal year 2011. Considering the bill that this House will soon consider, we're seeing a stunning lack of leadership on behalf of Washington Democrats, including Senate Majority Leader Reid and President Obama, who've refused to do the work that Americans sent them here to do. They've exhibited willful disregard for our troops and their families, who are uncertain about their paychecks with a government shutdown looming. The bill we will debate and pass funds the Department of Defense for the remainder of the year while cutting another $12 billion in wasteful Washington spending. Lest we forget, the reason this problem exists at all is because the liberal Democrat elites were so incapable of governing in the last Congress that they couldn't even pass a budget for the first time since modern congressional budgets were first created over 30 years ago. They didn't do that because of their lack of leadership then and their apparent realization that the American people had tired of big spending, big government policies streaming out of Washington, which is why the Republicans now control the House of Representatives. Today, with real leadership in the House, we have real solutions to these real problems. House Republicans have passed H.R. 1, which is a continuing resolution that takes us to the end of the fiscal year. The Democrat response? In another display of their lack of leadership, Senator Reid sits on his hands while Senator Schumer tinkers in his game of manipulating the liberal political message on a phone call with reporters. House Republicans then took the lead in crafting two short-term continuing resolutions, H.J. Res. 44 and H.J. Res. 48, providing for an additional 5 weeks of funding authority while cutting $10 billion in wasteful federal spending along the way. Realizing that the stubborn liberal elites in the Senate and White House are using the threat of a government shutdown to continue their failed wasteful spending policies, House Republicans last week passed H.R. 1255, the Government Shutdown Prevention Act, which provided for enactment of H.R. 1 in the event that the liberal malaise continues to stymie progress on fiscal 2011 appropriations. After all of these gestures of good faith made by House Republicans, the time has now come for the hapless liberal Democrat elites in the Senate and the White House to make a decision. It's time to decide between acting responsibly, abandoning favored political alliances, and continuing their failed big government policies as a solution to all earthly problems. These points aside, there's one truth upon which everyone could probably agree, that the new Republican House leadership has changed the discussion in Washington, D.C. and across the country. Whereas the previous discussion in Washington revolved solely around how much more money we should spend, today the discussion is how much more money we should cut. Americans can now rest easy knowing that their message was received by responsible adults here in the House, and we will work to reflect their support for a leaner federal government focused on finding solutions to problems rather than political gamesmanship and perpetual misguided adventures in social engineering. Speaker Boehner has told the President that the House will not be put in a box and forced to choose between two options that are bad for the country, by accepting a bad deal that fails to make real spending cuts or accepting a government shutdown due to Senate inaction. And that this is why House Republicans, in lieu of an agreement in which the White House and Senate agree to real spending cuts, are offering the third option, another good faith gesture that funds our troops through the end of the fiscal year while cutting an additional $12 billion in wasteful government spending and keeps the government running for another week. Real leadership is long overdue in this Congress, Mr. Speaker, and it's refreshing to see the new House Republican majority step in and fill the void left by such a devastating lack of leadership that's resulted from liberal Democrat domination of this city for far too long. Let's start by voting for this rule and the underlying bill. And with that, I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentlelady from North Carolina reserves the balance of her time. The gentleman from Massachusetts is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the gentlewoman from North Carolina, my friend Dr. Fox, for yielding me the customary 30 minutes, and I yield myself such time as I may consume. Mr. Speaker, I rise in strong opposition to this closed rule and to the misguided underlying legislation. Mr. Speaker, enough is enough. Enough political posturing, enough governing by press conference, enough finger-pointing press releases, Facebook updates and tweets. Democrats have already agreed, reluctantly, to tens of billions of dollars in cuts. Many of these cuts are from programs that are very near and dear to us. We have come more than halfway, and I'm pleased that Speaker Boehner agreed to attend a negotiating session with President Obama and Senator Reid last night. The truth, Mr. Speaker, is that it shouldn't be this hard to come up with a budget to finish this year. President Obama and Senator Reid are trying to work with Speaker Boehner to come up with a bipartisan agreement that moves this country forward. But that's not what we see coming from the Republican Party in the House. Unfortunately, as of right now, the Republican leadership is continuing with their my way or the highway obstructionism. But let's be clear about what's really going on here. Let's at least be straight with the American people. This impasse is not because of disputes between Democrats and Republicans. It's because of an intra-party feud between sensible, pragmatic Republican legislators and angry, take-no-prisoner Republican activists. Now, I know that many of my friends on the other side of the aisle would like to accept the billions and billions of dollars in cuts that the Democrats have offered and declare victory. Unfortunately, their Republican Party has been hijacked by people who relish a shutdown of the federal government, people who refuse to take yes for an answer. They are more interested in making a point than in making law. And unless and until the Republican leadership in this House is willing to stand up to that radical element and stop moving the goalposts, we will not be able to move forward. Now, my friends on the other side of the aisle talk a good game about wanting to come up with a compromise. Unfortunately, this bill before us today does nothing to achieve that goal. In fact, it is a step backwards. This bill, like H.R. 1 before it, isn't going anywhere. The Senate leadership and the White House have already made it very clear that yet another short-term continuing resolution is not acceptable. Further, this bill continues the misguided priorities that we have seen from the Republican leadership of the House for the last several months. It cuts vital domestic programs that families, communities, and states rely on during these difficult economic times. And let me just give you a few examples of the cuts to programs that will directly affect the people in Massachusetts that I'm honored to represent. H.R. 1363 would cut the Land and Water Conservation Fund, which helps preserve open space, by another $71.5 million. It cuts $700 million from the Clean Water and Drinking Water revolving funds. I don't know of a community in this country that doesn't have infrastructure needs. And the state revolving fund is one of the few areas where they can get money to help repair sewers and deal with stormwater and a whole bunch of other issues. But they cut it by $700 million more. And most egregiously of all, it cuts $390 million from LIHEAP, from the LIHEAP contingency fund. That's fuel assistance for poor people, mostly elderly, who need it as we see fuel prices continue to rise. So there it is, Mr. Speaker. There's the clear difference in priorities between the two parties. The Republicans would rather shut down the government than provide heating assistance to some of the most vulnerable people in this country. I should also note that this bill would provide funding for the Department of Defense for the rest of the year, but nothing else. Every member of this House believes that making sure our troops get their paychecks is a top priority. The men and women who serve this country in uniform deserve our support. But, Mr. Speaker, so do the seniors of this country. So do the children of this country. So do the poor and the hungry of this country. So do the people who can't afford hotshot lobbyists and multi-million-dollar ad campaigns. We're supposed to represent them, too. A couple of days ago, we saw where the Republican priorities are. They made them crystal clear in their budget proposal. Eliminate Medicare as we know it. Eviscerate Medicaid. Cut funding for education. Cut funding for medical research, health care, environmental protection, and infrastructure in order to make sure that the wealthiest individuals and companies can keep their special interest tax breaks. Oil companies continue to get their taxpayer subsidies. Why, I don't know. Why they need them, I don't know, but they continue to get them and they're protected. Donald Trump continues to get his tax cut under their proposal. But they go after programs that impact working people and people who are the most vulnerable. That may fly on Wall Street, but it sure isn't going to fly on Main Street. So again, Mr. Speaker, I say that enough is enough. It is time for serious people to do some serious legislating. The bill before us is a million miles away from that. I would urge my colleagues to reject this closed rule and to reject the underlying legislation, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman from Massachusetts reserves the balance of his time. The gentlewoman from North Carolina is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield myself such time as I may consume.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My colleague from Massachusetts and I are actually, I think, getting fairly fond of each other, spending so much time in the Rules Committee as we do. However, I really have to call into question a couple of comments that he has made. Is this bill really a step backwards when we're funding our troops for the rest of the year, taking away the uncertainty that they have just in case the government votes to shut down or the Senate doesn't act as it should and allows the government to shut down? Do we really need to continue all the appropriations for LIHEAP, the funding for helping people pay their heating bills when we're in April this year? I mean, this is money that goes until the end of September. I hardly think that we're going to have people freezing to death in this country between now and September 30th. Do we need to be looking after seniors and children? Obviously we do. Republicans are not heartless people. but we have to look after them in a responsible way. Cutting spending is the way to be responsible to them. And, Mr. Speaker, I have to remind my colleague again that we're here to fix a problem that they left for us last year, funding the federal government for the rest of this year. Yesterday in the Rules Committee, one of our colleagues said, let's stop talking about the past and talk about the future when we brought this up. Well, Mr. Speaker, Republicans would like nothing more than to do that, but we're doing all that we can to avoid a government shutdown, and that is what this rule and bill are all about this morning. Republicans understand that unless we change course, higher taxes, inflation, interest rates, and unemployment will cripple our economy and rob our children of the opportunity to pursue the American dream. Let's be clear. We don't have deficits because Americans are taxed too little. We have deficits because Washington spends too much. We've got to stop spending money we don't have. Right now, we're borrowing 43 cents for every dollar that we spend. And I want to talk a little bit about the long-term effects of what we're planning to do in this Congress this spring under Republican majority. The budget resolution introduced by Budget Committee Chairman Paul Ryan and passed out of the Budget Committee last evening will spur job creation, stop spending money we don't have, and lifts the crushing burden of debt. It's a plan that puts the budget on a path to fiscal stability and our country on a path to prosperity by cutting $6 trillion in federal spending over 10 years and takes government spending below 20% of GDP. Mr. Speaker, historically, our government spending has been between 18 and 20% of GDP. Once we go over that, we're endangering our country, and that's where our colleagues across the aisle have been for a long time. The White House predicts that their proposal will reduce the deficit by only $1.1 trillion over the same period of time. According to the nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office, President Obama's budget would generate more than $9.5 trillion in additional deficits between fiscal years 2012 and 2021. I have actually a visual here, Mr. Speaker, that shows exactly what's going to happen under President Obama's budget. In contrast, the Republican budget resolution provides us with a path to prosperity by limiting the federal government to its core constitutional roles, keeping America's promises to seniors, and unleashing the genius of America's workers, investors, and entrepreneurs. The Republican budget has a projected real GDP growth of $1.5 trillion over the next 10 years. With this budget resolution, we're taking direct aim at wasteful Washington spending, as opposed to the Obama budget that spends more than $46 trillion over the next decade. Since January of 2009, there's been a 24% increase in non-discretionary spending, a number that jumps to 84% when stimulus funds are included, Mr. Speaker. Democrats promised if we paid for their stimulus, unemployment would stay below 8%. Then it soared to 10%. $1 trillion in debt later, Americans know they didn't get what they paid for. The 2009 stimulus law has gotten the most attention, with considerable focus on the billions of dollars it wasted on dubious government projects, as well as the many promises it broke with respect to job creation and economic growth. The Republican budget resolution projects an unemployment rate of 4% by 2015, Mr. Speaker. If we continue on the wrong path we're on now, Americans will not be able to rely on Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security in order to plan for retirement if we don't take action. Republicans want to serve as good stewards of the investment of millions of Americans paying into Social Security. Republicans will save $750 billion through Medicaid reform in the form of block grants to states, giving governors greater and much-needed flexibility in their budgets. As it stands, the share of the budget that goes to these entitlement programs is growing rapidly, and demographics, economics, and skewed political incentives are driving Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid into bankruptcy. Alice Rivlin, the former Clinton OMB director, has called Medicare's current policy, quote, not sustainable. Cutting spending is about ending wasteful spending, making the government leaner and more efficient, showing respect to hardworking taxpayers, and making the tough choices today that save our children and grandchildren from even tougher choices tomorrow. For hardworking Americans, this isn't about politics. It's about their life and putting our economy and our nation first. With that, Mr. Speaker, I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentlewoman from North Carolina reserves. Gentleman from Massachusetts recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I yield myself such time as I may consume.
Without objection.
I have no disagreement with the gentlelady from North Carolina in terms of trying to eliminate waste, fraud, and abuse in government. I think we are all for a leaner government, but what we're not for is a meaner government. And that is what the Republican policies are all about, a meaner government. There's a story that I will submit to the record here that talking about the Republican budget, says the Budget Office claims the GOP Medicare plan could lead to rationing, making it more difficult for our senior citizens to get health care by basically obliterating Medicare. You may save a few bucks in the short term, but you're going to deny them care in the long term. I don't see how that is right. Secondly, I didn't talk about the past in my opening statement. The gentlelady did. I just want the record to be clear about the past and how we got into this mess. When Bill Clinton left office, we eliminated the deficit and we were paying down the debt. We had all-time high job growth. George Bush comes to office. His reckless tax cuts that are not paid for, hundreds of billions of dollars added to our debt. A Medicare prescription drug bill that was not paid for, wasn't paid for, more expensive than the Republicans advertised. Add that on to our debt. 2 wars that weren't paid for. You know, when the first President, George Bush, went to war against Saddam Hussein, when Iraq invaded Kuwait, he went around and he got member nations in the area to actually pitch in and to help pay for the war, so that the burden wasn't only on the United States. George Bush II comes into office. 2 wars, we don't pay for them. They're all, there's no tax on anybody. It gets onto our credit card. That is just not right. Men and women in uniform are sacrificing. Their families are sacrificing. The rest of us have been asked to do nothing. They just put it on the credit card. That is not right. So, Mr. Speaker, I have a disagreement with the gentlelady, not over the issue of whether we need to reduce waste and abuse of government. I have an issue with her over where they're doing it. They protect tax breaks for big oil companies, tax breaks for Donald Trump, subsidies for corn ethanol, a big waste of money. All that's protected, and the way they balance the budget is not by going after that. They go after programs that help poor people. LIHEAP, WIC, the Women, Infants, and Children's Program, of all things. Pell Grants. We all know that to have a strong economy in the 21st century, we need a well-educated workforce. And they cut Pell Grants. They just slash them. That's where they're cutting. Cutting programs that help average people, regular people, and people who are vulnerable. That's what government should be about, is making sure that those people are taken care of and not forgotten. Instead, their budget and their priorities are protecting those who have a lot of wealth, you know, who don't need government. And I think I think what they're doing is misguided. And let me just read one final thing here. This is a story that just appeared on Politico, breaking news. President Obama is calling the House Speaker John Boehner and Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid back to the White House to negotiate on the budget at 1 p.m. Just before the announcement from the White House, Senator Reid said on the Senate floor that the numbers are basically there, but that the only thing holding up an agreement is ideology. He said he was not nearly as optimistic about reaching a deal as he was last night. So in other words, Mr. Speaker, this is no longer about numbers. Because, you know, and I regret that so much has had to be cut in order to satisfy my friends on the other side of the aisle. But now this is about ideology. They have all these riders on these bills, riders that deal with abortion, national public radio, riders that undercut EPA's ability to be able to ensure that there are safe drinking water and clean air. And they're insisting on all these ideological riders to be attached to whatever budget deal before they sign it. It's not about the numbers anymore. It's about a rigid right-wing ideology. So enough is enough, Mr. Speaker. I urge my Republican colleagues to go back to the negotiating table, negotiate in good faith, and let's get a deal, and let's move on to next year's business. I reserve my time.
The gentleman from Massachusetts reserves his time. The gentlewoman from North Carolina is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield myself such time as I may consume.
Without objection.
My colleague again from Massachusetts knows that every time he brags about what happened when Bill Clinton left office and we had a surplus, that he's going to get an answer to that, because he knows full well that Republicans were in control of the Congress. Republicans became in control of the Congress in 1995, and they controlled the Congress the last 6 years of Bill Clinton's presidency, and it's Republicans who created the surplus, not Bill Clinton. And we have to remind them every time that they're trying to rewrite history. Now, let me remind them, and then they blame George Bush. It's so convenient to do that. In January of 2007, the month Democrats took control of the Congress again, the CBO projected the federal government would run a surplus of $800 billion over 10 years, covering the period 2008 to 2017. But they took the Congress that January, and guess what? The most recent CBO projections available project the federal government to run a deficit of $7.4 trillion over the same period. This is an $8.2 trillion deterioration of the budget outlook during Democrat control of Congress.
Will the gentlelady yield for a question?
You can speak on your time, Mr. McGovern. I'll let you do that. I think that my colleague across the aisle talks a lot about creating a nanny state, taking care of people from birth until death. That's not what the American people want. We see that over in Europe, and it's failed. What the federal government does, and what school children should learn if they learn the preamble to the Constitution, if they read the Declaration of Independence, is that we're here to secure the blessings of liberty for the people. Creating a nanny state does not secure the blessings of liberty for the people. And he talks about how we're not now talking about numbers, but we're talking about ideology. I am happy to debate ideology with my colleague from Massachusetts any day. The American people do not want taxpayer-funded abortions. That's part of what we're talking about. That's part of our ideology. No, we should not be taking money from hardworking Americans and using that money to fund the killing of unborn babies. That is our ideology, and again, the majority of the American people agree with us, and we're going to stand on that ideology every day. The American people have, Mr. Speaker, the right to a fact-based conversation on the budget. We demand an end to budget gimmicks and accounting tricks used every year to make budgets look responsible when in fact they add to the debt. And that's part of our problem with what President Obama is recommending. He wants us to take mythical numbers that he projects and instead of real numbers that we've been using. Passing a short-term measure is a step in the right direction to cut spending while keeping the government open, but it's far from being enough. Excessive government spending has economic consequences for all Americans. Higher cost of living, higher interest rates, higher taxes. But, Mr. Speaker, we didn't get into this overnight, and we won't get out of it overnight. Investors and small businesses need confidence that Congress will use common sense American principles to cut spending and ensure a secure economic future. The Republican budget resolution can create 1 million private sector jobs over the next year. We're not going to create these high-paid government jobs that our colleagues have created. America's solution for job creation won't come by raising taxes to to pay for even more wasteful Washington bureaucracy. Democrats tried that approach with the stimulus and it failed. Republicans, on the other hand, estimate that with the Path to Prosperity budget resolution introduced this week and passed out of the Budget Committee, wages will go up by $1.1 trillion over the next 10 years, yielding an average increase in income of $1,000 per year for each American family. Mr. Speaker, we need to do in this House what the American people expect us to do, be reasonable stewards, responsible stewards of their money, and adhere to the ideology which has made this the greatest country in the world. And with that, I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentlelady reserves the balance of her time. The gentleman from Massachusetts is recognized.
I use myself such time as I may consume. Mr. Speaker, just 2 points. One, on the issue of abortion, we have, with the law of the land, under the Hyde language, is that no federal funds can be used to finance abortion. This is introducing abortion into this budget debate is divisive and doesn't belong there. But it's all about ideology, and I get it. So don't say it's about numbers anymore. It's about this kind of right-wing ideology going after National Public Radio, trying to undercut the EPA. I get it. There's a time and a place to do that. This is not it. The other thing I'd say is, when I listen to my colleague from North Carolina, the question I was going to ask, if Republicans are responsible for deficit reduction under Bill Clinton, then who is responsible for the increase in deficit when they were in charge of the presidency, the House, and the Senate? I mean, when they had all 3 branches of government. At some point you've got to take some responsibility, and at some point you have to live up to the fact that some of the policies that my colleagues pursued when they were in charge here drove this economy into a ditch and added significantly to our deficit. At this time, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to yield 4 minutes to the gentleman from New Jersey, Mr. Pallone.
Gentleman from New Jersey is recognized for 4 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I listened to what the gentlewoman on the other side said, and I was really amazed because she was harking back to when we had a Democratic president, Bill Clinton, and a Republican Congress, and how we worked together to accomplish certain goals. Well, that's exactly what's missing now. If you listen to what my colleague from Massachusetts said, he said, once again, the president is calling the Speaker, the Republican Speaker, and the Democratic Majority Leader in the Senate back to the White House to try to work something out. That's what's happening here. But it's the House Republicans and their leadership that refuse any kind of negotiation. They keep saying, oh, yeah, they're going to work it out, but they don't. And they keep insisting on this draconian H.R. 1, this continuing resolution that really hurts America, kills jobs. No, I will not yield at this time, and kills jobs. So I asked the gentlewoman, yes, let's go back to those times. Let's have the Republicans here in the House work together with the President and with Senator Reid on the other side. Now, you said before that this CR that's up now would prevent a government shutdown. Just the opposite is true. It's a step backward. It's going to lead directly towards a government shutdown because Republican leadership knows that this bill will not pass the Senate. It doesn't have any cuts in defense. It actually says we'll keep the level of funding for defense till the end of the year. Well, why aren't defense cuts on the table? And it continues with this ideological battle. There's actually abortion language in this CR, is my understanding. And the gentlewoman actually said, well, that's an issue here that we need to resolve, that we should deal with. Well, no, that's not the case, because if you continue on this path, no defense cuts, bring up abortion, this bill will certainly not pass the Senate, the President will not sign it, and so we're just simply wasting our time. What's happening here is that the Republicans are ignoring the fact there are Democrats in the majority in the Senate, and there's a Democratic president. You can't have it my way or the highway. And that's what we've been hearing for the last 3 months, my way or the highway. Now, I just want to mention another thing. I was glad that the gentlewoman brought up the budget, which is to follow, because we know that this bad CR, or spending bill that we're dealing with now, is a precursor to an even worse budget bill that the Republicans have proposed. And I want to tell you, you talked about a previous era. The problem with the Republican budget, there are so many, but the biggest problem is it's going to put an end to Medicare. I was here when Speaker Gingrich became Speaker, and he said he wanted Medicare to wither on the vine.
And that is what the Republican budget will do. It will end Medicare as we know it, because there'll be no guarantee. Seniors will go back to the old days when they had to try to find their own private health insurance, and maybe the government will give them some help with it, but for the most part, they won't be able to find health insurance. So there won't be Medicare, they won't be able to get health insurance, and what are they going to do? They're going to be out on the street. They're going to end up in the emergency room again, which was what happened with the elderly before we passed Medicare. And the gentlewoman went on to say that she's going to reform Medicaid. Well, she's reforming Medicaid by basically giving a block grant to the states. And what does that mean? The states won't have enough money to pay for seniors' nursing home care. So nursing homes will close, or they won't provide quality services. We'll see seniors getting bed sores again if they can even find a nursing home. So essentially, we're also going to end Medicaid. 65% of Medicaid goes towards seniors and the disabled. You look at this Republican budget, and this is just a precursor to what we're going to see next week. It will end Medicare as we know it by eliminating its guaranteed coverage. It slashes Medicaid for seniors in nursing homes, health care for children, and Americans with disabilities. It increases the cost of a college education for close to 10 million middle-class students. It gives away billions in subsidies and tax breaks to big oil. I yield back.
Gentleman's time has expired. The gentleman from Massachusetts reserves. The gentlewoman from North Carolina is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I now yield such time as he may consume to the distinguished gentleman from California, Mr. Dreyer, the chair of the Rules Committee.
The gentleman from California is recognized for as much time as he wishes to consume.
Consent to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection.
Mr. Speaker, I thank my friend from Grandfather Community, North Carolina, for her superb management of this rule. And we are here with a couple of very important priorities. Number one, we want to ensure that the government doesn't shut down, and that's why we have come forward with this continuing resolution that will provide funding to keep the government open for another week, and first and foremost, to ensure that our men and women in uniform have what they need and that their families are not going to be victimized by what has taken place over the past several months. Now, Speaker, as I listen to my friend from New Jersey talk about this, I don't like to engage in finger-pointing. I really don't, but I think it's very key. And the reason I don't like to engage in finger-pointing, as my friend from Worcester laughs at that, is that the moment you point your finger at someone, I was always taught that there are three pointing right back at you. And I think it's important for us to not point fingers, but I think it's instructive for us to look at what it is that got us here. Now, I suspect that my friend from Grandfather Community probably explained the fact that for the first time in our nation's history, since a Budget Act has existed, we went through a Congress without a budget having been passed. That's what happened last year. And for the first time ever, we had no appropriations bills passed. Now, I'm not pointing fingers, but I will say that there was not a Republican in the White House, there was not a Democratic Senate, and there certainly was not a Democratic United States House of Representatives. So this was dumped onto the laps of the new majority here in the House of Representatives, which, as we all know, if we look at the challenges that are ahead of us, we still have a Democrat in the White House, we still have a Democratic-controlled United States Senate. So of the three levers of power legislatively, we have control of only one-third of those. And in light of that, we're trying to do the best that we can under somewhat challenging circumstances. Now, last November 2nd, the American people sent a very strong and powerful message to Washington, D.C. My party happened to see the largest gain in nearly three-quarters of a century. 1938 is the last time we saw the kind of change in favor of the Republican Party that we did last November 2nd. And so in light of that, there is a powerful message, and I'm happy to say that that message has been heard by both Democrats and Republicans. Why? Because with the 82% increase in non-defense discretionary spending that we saw under Speaker Pelosi, the American people said we need to bring an end to that nonsense. And guess what? We have Democrats and Republicans alike talking about the need for spending. Since we've passed H.R. 1, we have had $2 billion in spending cuts every single week. But it is a drop in the bucket. It is a drop in the bucket. Now, over the last 2 days, I've had the chance to meet with a very bright, dynamic, new member of the British Parliament, a man called Matthew Hancock. I've just had a chance to meet with the Facebook girl who was one of the leaders of the tremendous change and revolution that has taken place in Egypt. I'm going to be meeting in just a few minutes with leaders from Mongolia. And, Mr. Speaker, I have to say the world is looking at us as we deal with this terrible situation today, and it's critical for us to step up to the plate and provide strong leadership. Now, what has happened is we have, as my friend from New Jersey underscored, come forward with a budget. It was just unveiled this week. Mr. Ryan, the chairman of the Budget Committee, is going to be bringing it to the Rules Committee, and we will consider it next week. And it is absolutely horrifying to hear the characterizations that have been provided. Now, Mr. Speaker, obviously encouraged by fear tactics, my constituents in California have been saying, please, please, please don't support the Republican budget which will abolish Medicare. That message over and over again has been coming. Don't support the Republican budget which will abolish Medicare. And, Mr. Speaker, the thing that's so disturbing is that there are senior citizens, elderly Americans who are out there, and they are very emotionally distraught over the fact that people are telling them from the other side of the aisle, and it's very close to the remarks that my friend from New Jersey just offered, that we are going to abolish Medicare. Mr. Speaker, I think it's very important for the American people to understand that we are seeking to save Medicare. Saving Medicare is what this is all about. Now, we all know, if you look at the history of Medicare, it was established in 1965. In 1970, Mr. Speaker, the cost of Medicare was $7 billion. In 1970, it was $7 billion. Last year, 4 decades later, last year, 2010, the cost of Medicare was $528 billion. Now, Mr. Speaker, in light of that, there is realization that since we've seen Medicare expand to address the needs of the disabled and so many other areas, there needs to be reform so that future generations will be able, since they're compelled to pay their FICA tax, to receive the benefits that they deserve from Medicare. But, Mr. Speaker, the idea of frightening senior citizens today by leading them to believe that our budget is going to abolish Medicare is outrageous, and I believe that the American people are smart enough to understand that these fear tactics can't stand. We have a responsibility, I believe now, an obligation to counter the lies that are being put out there claiming that we're trying to abolish Medicare. Now, Mr. Speaker, the other thing that's important for us to note is that the American people are hurting all the way across the board. We have an unemployment rate, which we're all encouraged at the fact that it's dropped by a full percentage point down to 8.8%, but it is still unacceptably high. And that's why we need to focus on job creation and economic growth. And, Mr. Speaker, if we had 2% more GDP growth in this country, we would be in a position where we would, in fact, not be having to anguish over the kind of spending that we see right now. Obviously, it's important for us to recognize that the role of government has become way too big and needs to be dramatically reduced, not only because of spending, but because of the encroachment on individual liberty that exists. But we need to realize that government does have things that it needs to do, and we need to generate an increase in that flow of revenues. $1.6 trillion national debt, which is deficit, which is in the president's budget, coupled with a $14 trillion in accumulated debt, is unacceptable. That's why our goal is to focus on job creation, economic growth. Our colleague Dave Camp of the Ways and Means Committee is focusing on reducing that rate on job creators in this country, the highest of any nation on the face of the earth, now that Japan has reduced their rate, and that top rate on individuals. Doing that, coupled with reducing the regulatory constraints that is imposed, will address the needs of the poor. Now, my friend from Worcester last night in the Rules Committee was talking about the fact no one is focused on the plight. That is our priority, to make sure that we have opportunity so that people who are truly in need have their needs met, but also to ensure that we have opportunity. Creating jobs for individuals is what we need to do. And so, Mr. Speaker, we are committed to keeping the government open, supporting our troops, and bringing about, with this continuing resolution, a $12 billion reduction in spending. It's something that, if we can pass it here, the Senate should pass it. Everyone's saying they know the Senate ain't going to pass it. The fact of the matter is the Senate should pass it. But we hope that it's not necessary. We hope that Speaker Boehner, Leader Reid, and President Obama are able to come up with an agreement that will ensure that we don't go through what would be a very difficult thing, that is shutting down the government. So I urge my colleagues to support the rule, and I thank my friend for yielding.
The gentleman yields back his time. The gentlewoman